Welcome to Shark Cap Table LITE. Make a deal and keep your arms and legs. This tutorial is about the art and science of utilizing royalties as a method of funding and the effects that royalties can have on dilution and investor return. We have used the same data from the prior tutorial, so all of it is the same, all the way straight down right through section C. Now we are going to scroll to section D, which is where we do our magic. Let's review the deal. Let's look at the details of the equity deal that we have already set. $300,000 is the equity investment. By virtue of a $500,000 investor pre-money value, the model has calculated a price per share of a little over 2 cents, which generates 14 million shares. The exit has been set at 4 years, and based upon a $2 million exit value, the 37.5% that the investor owns, by again virtue of this pre-money valuation, generates $750,000. 37.5% of 2 million is $750,000. Now, one more thing we need to do prior to creating royalties is to select from the drop-down the number which is represented to the left. This simply gives you a little scratch pad that copies and retains what these numbers are, because you're going to have to look at them on a before and after basis, and this model changes lots of numbers when you start playing with these spinners. So here we have, you can see that these numbers are the same. It's a convenient checkpoint for us. So now that we have reviewed the equity deal, we're ready to do a combination deal. That's where we go over and select the combo. This time we're going to go do gross sales. We're going to dial in 5%, and we will have generated $130,000 worth of revenue. And you can see that that increases the internal rate of return to 31.86. And by the way, this is an attached royalty, meaning we did not charge them anything for it. We're just adding it on. We can go up here to our section C, and we can actually see the effect of that royalty. And notice it stops when we sell. If we continue out here to year 7, it continues on unabated until forever. Now that's the bad part about a royalty of that type. You may never get your money back. So a gross sales royalty continues until you sell the business, and you can watch that along this line here. Now let's scroll down and let's try something. We could increase the return and just let it go at that, or we could come in and we could say, well, let's increase the pre-money value and move the internal rate of return down to about this number right here. So by increasing the pre-money value by $200,000, we have equated essentially the internal rates of return without the effect of the royalty. Now look what happened. We picked up 7.5 percentage points of equity, and the internal rate of return is the same, so the investor should be happy. Now let's do another one here. Let's go to the gross sales. Let's look up a preferential royalty. Now we have to do something about this, so let's spin in a minimum royalty. This is just a number. Don't get freaked out by it. And then this is another number that just simply says, well, let's multiply this number by this number to get a guaranteed return, or at least a maximum return of, let's say, $100,000. Now we need to set this back at the 500 to make sure that we're at the same. And this preferential royalty gives us a 30.72, so it's a little, almost 5 percentage points better. But the important thing about a preferential royalty is that if you should sell the business, watch what happens if we sell in year 3. This royalty just made a big jump. The reason is the sum of this and this and this must equal $100,000. The advantage of the preferential royalty is that watch what happens as we go into the future. Now the sum of this and this and this, notice this is hardly bigger than this, even though the sales jumped. That means we've just about finished up our preferential royalty. And watch what happens when we go into the next year. There are no more royalties, see? So it's good for us and it's good for the investor, because if you sell quickly, you get the preferential amount back, unlike a regular royalty, which just, it is what it is. Let's go to the royalty deal and see how we might structure a pure royalty deal. Let's put in the $300,000 that we're trying to raise and see what happens with it. Now we're almost there. $300,000. There we go. We'll leave the preferential royalty rate at 5%, start in year 1, and we'll again do a $50,000, multiply it by 2, so he's going to get a minimum of $100,000. Now you can almost immediately tell that that's not very good, because he's got 300 in it. The best he can do is 100,000, and naturally the numbers show that. He gets a minus 28 internal rate of return, and the reason is, here's a royalty stream. Come back, and that royalty stream still is 100, but he's not making very much money because he paid too much. Let's set it back at 4. That's the 4th year. Now let's give this man a little better royalty. Let's give him $150,000 and give him a 2-to-1. So that gives him a 3. Now that doesn't really help him any, because he's just getting his money back. That's not a very good rate of return just to get your money back. So let's go to $200,000 and give him a 2-to-1. And if you didn't want to do that, you could just simply put this down at 1 and crank in the number here until you get whatever number you want. Let's give him $400,000. There we go, 400. Now he begins to get a positive rate of return. You can see that by smaller royalties, and then when you sell in the 4th year, he gets to pay back the amount that we promised him. And look what happens as you go farther forward. Let's come up here. So he still extends there for 5 years. I'll bet you the next year is none. Oh, a little bit. And then finally the 7th year. So the sum of all of these is $400,000. Finally in the 7th year, the royalties stop. Now let's see what would happen to this line here if we kept the 400 the same and increased the royalty rate. See it? It just comes right back. So if you could afford a 10, you could get him paid out a little bit better, and he'd get a little higher rate of return. I basically think that pure royalty deals as a methodology of financing is going to be too onerous and not as good as an equity deal. But I like the combination of royalties and equities. Now, let's look at one more royalty that we have here, and it's called a payback royalty, or AKA Mr. Wonderful. So when we see red, we spin in the pre-payback amount of 10%. Now this is usually Mr. Wonderful, as on my favorite program, Shark Tank. And usually he says, you know, I'll give you the money, and I want 10% before payback and 5% after payback. So we need to zero this. Give it a couple seconds here. It'll crank itself down. And we got to get this down. Now let's see what kind of an internal rate of return occurs with a Mr. Wonderful royalty. And a payback royalty works like a preferential royalty. The only difference is that you've got different rates. Notice that you get a big lump at the end when you sell. And that's important because that can make a pretty good rate of return. The problem is that he's paid $300 for it, and he just gets his money back no matter what. You'd have to actually go out a little further in time until such time as he's getting more money. Here's the first year that he actually gets more money. Now he's starting to really crank up and go, and that's pretty good. See, now we've got a 28.55 after 7 years of a royalty stream. And his total take is 1.220. So that's why Mr. Wonderful likes these royalties, because if you get a company going, you can get your money back. Now, you know, if you get too piggy on the royalties, you might suck too much money out of the company. You have to be very careful of that. That's why you kind of have to look at your cash, see how much cash you have left after you pay the royalties and that sort of thing. Well, all the rest of this, since we've gone through the 3 types of pure royalties and 2 types of combo royalties, you can see that there's plenty of room to negotiate deals. And of course, everything here is going to reflect exactly what you've done. And of course, you still have to do your investor pitch and that sort of thing, but all the machinery is here. You know how to do it. There is one section down here which is really a calculating section, and people can see a little more clearly what's going on. I would not recommend that you come down here and try to structure the deal. Go up top, structure the deal, then split the screen. If you want to come down here and see things go and move, be my guest. That pretty much does it for the royalties. My preference is the preferential royalty with some equity, and you'll find that that's probably the best one. Thank you very much.